Hi, I'm James Brookes, and welcome to From the Factory Floor, a conversational podcast about all things startup and tech, brought to you by the folks at tsf.tech. So welcome to the fourth episode of From the Factory Floor, a podcast about all things startup from the folks at tsf.tech. So last time I was joined very graciously by Ian and Eric, and we talked about all things minimum viable product and MVP. And we hinted at the end that the next stage in the process was to talk about roadmap and tech vision. And this week I'm joined by our CTO, Aleksa. So Aleksa, well, thanks for joining me.
Hey James, good to be here.
Thank you very much. So obviously everyone else has done a little bit of an intro. Seeing as it's your debut, I mean, if we had sort of a football shirt, you could hold it up and sort of do the old manager sort of post. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and sort of your role, what you do at the Startup Factory? Obviously, I know.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm a Chief Technology Officer at the Startup Factory. So my role is really to set and manage the tech strategy for the TSF itself, but also for all the startups that we work with. I work closely with engineering teams, both again in the TSF and the companies we invest in, to make the roadmaps and MVPs and strategies into something tangible. On the other side, my mission is also to act as a tech conduit, if you want, for investors and other non-tech senior stakeholders that we work with, to try to demystify tech, because tech can often be seen as something impenetrable and difficult to understand, and is a big black box for a lot of people. So understanding what the tech is and how it can help and what are the benefits and how the business should approach working with technology is also in the remit of my role.
Yeah, I've always thought, sort of, especially when obviously we worked together, especially at the start, doing sort of the tech vision and product roadmap that which we'll go into shortly. It really is sort of almost the translator of the sort of deep tech into a way that at least I can understand it. I know obviously a lot of our founders who aren't technical, which goes to the point that you don't have to be a technical person to run a tech company. I'm sure Jeff Bezos doesn't know that much around how AWS actually works.
Absolutely, and there's a lot of things about tech that are maybe difficult and complex, but a lot of it are about common sense and the way we use technology in sort of day-to-day lives as well. It isn't that hard, and that's also part of what I'm trying to do, to explain that tech is not that hard, and you can embrace it, and even if it looks a bit complex, it can be picked up and understood.
Yeah, and apologies to Jeff if he is listening and does actually know how AWS works. It's a bit of an assumption. So obviously the whole point that we've got you here today, Aleksa, is to talk about the product roadmap and technology vision. So last time we spoke all things MVP and spoke about you got to have that vision and have goals. And I know sort of when you and I sort of help put these two things together for our clients, we really look at how that goes together. So I'll just sort of throw a quick point notice. So do you want to just sort of describe what is a product roadmap and what's the point in having a roadmap, knowing if you already know where you're going with your vision?
Yeah, it's actually quite good that this podcast is following the last episode on the MVP, which got some really interesting insights in how to build something small, focused, delivery of something that can prove an idea with minimal time and cost effort. But then what is important to communicate and understand, an MVP is not an end of the road. It's just the first chapter. So what founders would want to do is build on that MVP, build almost a story around it, define milestones that will inspire what the future will be. I like always to paraphrase something I hear quite often, which is especially in sort of environmental and historical context, which is saying think globally but act locally. That's something I've done throughout my career as well. And I like to say in this concept is think big and act small. So you want definitely to start with MVP, something small and tangible to deliver. But you need those big thoughts, and those big thoughts and ideas and blue sky thinking need to be properly represented and managed almost as a core part of the product. And this is where both product roadmap and technology vision come into place. Where the product roadmap will talk about, the timeline and the features and what we're going to do and build, how we're going to excite our customers. The technology vision is there to tell how we're going to get there, to make sure that we are using not only technology of today, but we are ready to use technology for tomorrow, and definitely not looking into technology that's already a legacy one.
Yeah, it's almost the a journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step sort of thing, and knowing where you want to get to, but being open enough to sort of be able to change your route to some extent, but knowing kind of where you need to be. And I have to say, it's one of those things, especially, I mean, you and I know it, especially when it comes to technology. A lot of times people want to use the biggest, the brightest, the newest, but it's often using the most appropriate technology.
Yes, and that balance is quite important. And I think while the MVP and that focus is important to demonstrate that you can execute on something that can become a viable business, what the roadmap and the technology vision will do, it will excite the investors, what's coming after that. It will keep the customers of the MVP coming for more because of the new stuff that will be coming along the lines. But it will also internally sort of a challenge and almost inspire your internal team, because you don't want, as I said, MVP is not end of the road, it's just the start. So I think from that perspective, it's also a big role of product roadmap and the technology vision is this communication, both with external stakeholders and customers, and even most importantly, probably with your internal team.
I mean, I've always found that to be the real power of the roadmap, which is mainly for actually internal teams. Obviously, it's great for clients to see what sort of features they're getting and what their timescales are, and what the huge multitude of tools. I know Jira's added a next gen feature which has got roadmaps, and they've got the portfolio add-in. There's also RoadMonk, which is a tool that obviously you and I have used before as well. But it's really that motivation for the internal team to show that there is a vision and they know what they're going to be working on. But obviously, talking about all these things, roadmaps. So the most important thing, I think, something to be really valuable for people to hear is, so how do we actually approach creating a roadmap? What are the constituent features of it?
Yeah, I think a few simple rules. It's always a bit difficult to start, I guess. When you talk to founders, they have the roadmap in their heads, and that's all they have. And they think, yeah, this is the idea, this is where I'm going to. But what is important to realize that it has to be written down. It has to be put into something tangible so you can actually manage and share it, because it won't be only one person's responsibility going forward. And with that in mind, it needs to be complete in a sense that all aspects of the future development of the product and the company should be in the roadmap. That's not only, the core features that we are talking about, but also some blue sky ideas which might be very far away, but it need to be put down. Also any sort of specific tech, regulatory activities, recruitments, any other sort of key dates, everything needs to be, this should be really like a window, this is what's coming up really. Making sure it's complete is very important. And then something you also alluded just before, it needs to be accessible. That's the key thing. So again, not in the head of someone, in something that's shareable. The tool is maybe not that important. I think you mentioned a few that we use, like RoadMonk, which is quite interesting and useful for us. But we also used in past Jira, didn't we? And even for some of the startups, simple, humble spreadsheet or a Google Doc, that should be enough as long as it's accessible. So completeness and accessibility, but you have to start somewhere. So just make sure that you start putting things in a document at least, so it's not in your head as a founder.
Oh, I love a spreadsheet. My project management background shining through. I might say I think one thing that people do forget sometimes, that a roadmap is a snapshot in time, but it's also a living document. So things do change. I mean, we've seen recently with the events of the world, you can't really predict what's going to happen. So you'd have this snapshot and think in 12 months and obviously a really important point is the further out you get, probably the more vague you should probably be, because it's where things are most likely to change. The details might change, the whole scope might change, you might pivot on your ideas. So
that's a very valid point. Yeah, it's a great that you mentioned them. I think when you think about the level of details in the roadmap, obviously the sooner the period is, maybe you can put a bit more details, because you have maybe idea what will happen in 2, 3, 4, 6 months. What will happen in 18 months? I mean, who knows what will change? Don't ask us whether we will be in the middle of a lockdown. Think of it, no. So I think that flexibility is important. So basically making sure that we can still have some vision and idea what's coming up, but maybe not on that level of detail. And as you also said, and I'll just reiterate, it's a living document. So nothing you put in the roadmap is set in stone. So that sort of continuous evaluation and changes on a weekly, monthly, or quarterly basis is very important.
Yeah, it's almost that sort of Pareto level thinking of you do 80% for the first 20% of your roadmap, and then just keep iterating as it changes. Because, like you say, I don't think any of us could have predicted what this year was going to be like. I think I couldn't have predicted 2016 when we had Trump, Brexit, and Leicester won the Premier League. I still think Leicester winning the Premier League is the most weird of all those, and hopefully one we don't see again. I'm sorry to any Leicester fans listening. So, obviously, we've spoken a lot there about some of the things that we've learned as we've developed these. Is there any real pitfalls that sort of point out to people, and sort of our experience of steering away from making some of those mistakes that you just do make as the more you do, more of these you do?
Yeah, I think as with everything, and especially in the startup world, you'll know, James, where we are in. I mean, you learn as you go. So it's, there won't be anything, this is how you do it. Just stick to it, and that's it. You always have to evolve and improve and learn and do things differently. But when it comes to doing the roadmap and basically managing it efficiently, I did find a few things that seem simple on the front of it, but sometimes not that obvious for new founders. One is, for example, that we, I think, touched again in a few places, where the roadmap is to start with usually in the founder's head, in their brain. They know what they want to achieve. But as the company scales, keeping it in one person's head is definitely not scalable or doable. So what is quite important for a growing company, or even for a young company to think about, is to appoint that sort of a person who is going to be a product owner, a manager of the product roadmap. And I'm not saying this in a sense of someone who can get all the ideas in. No, it is someone whose responsibility will be to think about the product constantly and engage with everyone who needs to be engaged to get the product roadmap in. So organize calls and reviews and make sure that the roadmap is always up to date to the current thinking, really.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's that it is a living document, and someone needs, whether it's the product owner or if that particular responsibility is deferred to, say, a project manager, making sure that everyone understands the timescales and also the implications of change. So when you're dealing with external suppliers, whether it's an external service, for example, and they're constructing something that you're waiting on, if there's a delay that they have, which might be completely beyond your control, which is also going back to what we said about this being a living document and not planning too far ahead, the implications of, if this is delayed, what we're going to do with this resource? Can we move things forward? Do we just push this back? What's the impact of that? And that's really one of the key roles, I think, of the product owner or a project manager, depending on where that sits. And when that's done well, I think there's such a clear vision on what everyone's supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I completely agree. And just in line with that, having someone being responsible, having those sort of regular reviews, people don't just often forget it, so create a roadmap up front and then maybe not touch it for a year. So having something in the calendar, something that will always remind you and nudge you to just at least look at the roadmap, even if you don't change anything. But more often than not, you will find that you want to tweak it, change it slightly, so it's always sort of represented the truth, really, as we know it at that point in time.
Yeah.
And I would just probably have just one more final advice, is to make sure, often forgotten again, to align the product roadmap with any sort of a development, sales, marketing activities you are planning. What I've seen in a few examples where the roadmap would have some very interesting, very innovative features that would be eventually delivered, but there was nothing on that roadmap that was planned to basically market that, to showcase to the people. So basically that was a bit of an afterthought and lower the impact of that particular feature, whatever it is. So make sure you line it up. So if you see there is an important thing on the roadmap coming in 3 months, let's make sure there's some marketing activities straight after that, so we can actually take advantage of that as well.
Yes, the other one there as well, of course, is recruitment. I know it's the evil word, and dealing with recruitment, especially at the moment, is particularly difficult with the situation. But aligning your roadmap and having that roadmap at a business level, really, and across any different departments or different roles, just so that everyone is on the same page, because the last thing you want is a really innovative, really exciting roadmap, and you've not put in that you need your first hire, another hire in 6 months, or a second hire in another 2 months, just to keep the momentum. And being realistic with that as well. We all know that things change, and it is difficult to predict the future. I mean, Mystic Meg wasn't great at it. At the end of the day, I don't think she ever won the lottery. So being able to try and work your way through that with an element of realism is sort of the key thing. And then, obviously, we've mentioned it a lot there, and it's the vision. Now, in previous episodes with Ian, we spoke about ideation and having this focus and this goal, really looking towards what the business could be. So how do you go about marrying up what the business goal is with the technical vision, and then do you work forwards from where you are, or backwards from the vision normally, and thinking about technology?
Yes. So as we said before, a roadmap is just one piece of the puzzle. This is where we're going to, and then you have to think about technology you want to employ to get to where you want to be. And then you have, again, conflicting priorities. You want something quick out there for the MVP, but you also want something that will potentially scale to the thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions of customers. You do want to be cost effective as you can up front, but without sacrificing that flexibility going forward. And that is the trick with the technology vision, in picking the right technologies, architecture, mobile strategy, and anything else that come into that space that sort of works well here and now, but actually scales out so it can grow further. I like here the football analogy as well. If you want to build, or a sports in general analogy,
I'll stick with football. We both like football.
If you want to build a winning team to win a championship, you'll bring the players who are in their prime, who are best now, and then you will do that. But if you want to build a dynasty, something that will win championship year after year for 10 and 20 years going forward, you also need to nurture up-and-coming talent and make sure that you evaluate them and give them chance to be those main players of the future. The same with technology. You want to use the proven tech to build your MVP, but you also need to find space for the younger, cutting-edge tech that might be very important in the future, although it's not at the moment. So simply so you can actually make that journey smoother.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you're a City fan, so you're in a rather rich vein of form in terms of the club's history and winning things. But I think that analogy of being ready for the now, but preparing for the future, really is one of the key cornerstones of running a startup. You've got to be realistic, but you've got to be visionary at the same time, which almost sounds like oxymoronic at times, a realistic visionary. But so, I mean, you mentioned a couple of things there, and it might be worth just unpacking those three. So really it was sort of the tech choices, the scalability, and then sort of the mobile considerations, and then especially things like security as well. So I don't know, in terms of the tech choices, how do you strike that balance between using something, and obviously recruitment comes into this as well, as we've already mentioned, using something that's now it's ready and takes some of the risk away from using that, bleeding edge tech, versus nurturing that young talent, that Phil Foden, so to speak?
Well, yes, I think picking the tech, programming languages, frameworks, tools that you use, it's a key ingredient to making a working software product, because the product will inherently have the characteristics of the tools you use to build it. I mean, if you use bad tools, you can't expect a good product. So from that perspective, you want to use something that is sort of proven and have a wide community. I think you mentioned something about the recruitment as well. So this is coming to that as well, because what you do want is tools and tech that is actually used widely in the sort of market that you are in. So you can easily build a team should you need to. Similarly, if you want to look forward, we said we want to use this bleeding edge tech, and because we don't want to neglect it and not have it. But what's important for the MVP is that stability. So maybe find something, an area where you can actually use something that's more of a bleeding edge without affecting too much your scope or your timeline for building an MVP and take it in. I know that will probably need a bit more effort than if you use something that's readily available and proven as it is. But the value of if that seed gives you something that you can build up in the future, or attracts people who are very interested in that particular small piece of tech, it will be much more valuable. So it is a risk you should take, but on a very measured level, again, not going all in on that and potentially making commitments a bit too soon, not knowing if the talent or in the sense of the technology will be proven going forward.
Yes, I imagine it's especially difficult. I mean, I remember the buzz last year around blockchain, and everyone wanted to use blockchain, and it is an exciting thing to use, but it's using the things that are appropriate. I think appropriate is probably the right word, because finding, good blockchain guys, I mean, I know the guys at BlockRocket are great to work with, and we've worked with them before, but it's, and even they advise, make sure you know your use case. What's it adding to you over using a normal data storage solution or some sort of data management?
Yes, and we take another example to containers and Docker, which is, it's becoming like a standard technology stack now, but it has been up and coming for a while. Having a tech like that in your arsenal will allow you to start small, what we talked about many times during this conversation, and have something that you can spin up quite quickly in any environment and run it, your pilots, your MVP, whatever it is. But using the same technology, you are basically empowered to scale to the Google scale if you wanted to. So that's about, finding the tech that will allow you to do that small start, cost-effective start, but also allow you to scale out easily on any cloud platform in the future.
Yeah, and it's being able to scale and, let's say, being elastic, because one of the main things we obviously look at is the running cost, because obviously the average startup isn't, cash rich. So being able to use something that's appropriate and cost effective is really important. I think that really leads into sort of the mobile discussion, because every man and his dog these days seems to have an idea for an app, and everyone always thinks right straight onto the app stores, whether it's Google or Apple stores. And in your experience, Aleksa, is it really, especially for an early stage startup, how would you approach that question of mobile?
Yeah, I think we all know mobile channels have become very ubiquitous for the modern generation of consumers. You expect an app now. Every software you have, is there an app? So that's the first question. That's where a lot of founders are coming from. Yeah, we need an app, and that's that really. However, there is a challenge with that in terms of MVP scope and budgets and cost effectiveness, because the mobile app software development ecosystem is very fragmented. It's bit harder to build quality products and launch them across the myriad of devices that are now available, both on our Apple and Android ecosystem, which are completely separate. So if you build a mobile app, it is like building two apps really. The skills and talent for mobile development are fragmented as well, so making this process very complex. However, I think there are options out there, and I think what our founders should ask themselves is what sort of mobile experience does the product need? Because there are other ways to give mobile experience without going full-blown native mobile apps. I'll mention a few. For example, you can have mobile-friendly web applications. So basically, it runs in the browser. It is mobile-friendly, so it's usable, but it's not really an app. And then you have something called progressive web application, which is, again, it's a website in essence, but the one that you can download to your app mobile phone screen. So it looks like an app. It behaves like an app. The only thing, it's not downloadable through the App Store. So that's the challenge with that. So these two options are much more efficient to build. And we would say to us founders quite often, let's start with this. The cost is much lower. We can get down much quicker. And then if we find out what the usage is, then we can go down the cross-platform or even native apps, for which, my view is native apps are probably the most expensive to get out, simply because you need properly two separate development streams. And they're only viable for really apps that target Instagram generation or mobile gaming and things like that you want to go into that straight away. Other than that, I would probably start on this sort of a simpler scale with the mobile-friendly web app and progressive web application.
Yeah, it's something we've always said about the MVP is, what can you do efficiently rather than quickly, and cost effectively rather than cheaply. It's cost effective to just have one thing, have one view which one team can work on, have that available to put out quickly, and then see how people use it. There's again numerous tools for testing usage. Is it mainly iOS users? Are any iOS users, or is it all Google app users? And you can then start to think about the implications of that, and that can then influence your roadmap going forward. That actually maybe you want to bring that native app forward if that's really the dream and that's the goal that you want to go down as part of your vision. But starting at that PWA stage to really help accelerate your growth and move into that build, measure, learn and iterate cycle. Because that's the most important thing, is learning what people do and then being able to iterate. And if you spend, countless thousands on building an iOS app and an Android app, you then have to make that change in both places potentially.
That is true, yes.
And then sort of the final point that you raised, and I'm just thinking about obviously where sort of we want to end this, and obviously thinking about the time here, because we always like to keep these to roughly half an hour. The last one we really mentioned was the specific requirements, and kind of mentioned some of the safeguards in the MVP episode about very specific things that some things. So in fintech, the security system can't really be an MVP. It has to be robust enough to be able to deal with people money and give them the security. In the same way, almost the air traffic control system has to have redundancies, and privacy obviously has to be a bit now with GDPR. So how do you approach having security and the privacy concerns into that vision and into the wider roadmap going forward?
Yeah, I'll maybe look at it a bit broader perspective. And when you think from a founder's perspective, you have an idea, you're building a feature set for MVP, and that's going to solve a particular problem, pain point for your customers. They're happy to pay for it. What is very important, if we try to help a lot of our startups with this, is to understand what are the non-functional features that you will need, that you maybe not think of them, and where do they sit on your roadmap? Is it something that needs to go in an MVP, or can it be looked a bit further down the line? I think two typical examples, as you said, there's a fintech, especially fintech. If you say selling a software or building something that's going to go to the bank's systems or anything like that, the security will be a paramount. So it can be the best feature in the world. No one else solved the problem, whatever it is in the banking or fintech sector. If the security is not good enough, it won't be looked favorably on. So that seems to be that can be quite important. Another example is, for example, also probably in fintech, but more importantly, it's a health sector or any sort of consumer-facing sector with the advent of GDPR and all privacy regulation. Again, having the feature, collecting the data, doing some maybe AI and things like that, it's all brilliant. But what can be overlooked is how does that impact the regulator? Because the last thing you want is you have a best thing in the world, and then someone comes back to you, actually you're using the data in the wrong way, you have to pay now £10 million fine. So these things need to be thought of as part of the technology vision and roadmap at that level and stage, and then figure out whether you need some of them or maybe a thin slice of them in the MVP phase, but then the rest at least have an idea where they sit in your timeline.
Yeah, I mean, you have to look at, obviously it's not quite the same scale with a startup, but you look at BA and was it £220 million that they got fined for incorrect use of data. I think Marriott Hotels also had a rather sizable fine. And off the top of my head, I can't exactly remember what the scale is, but it's a considerable chunk of your turnover, and that's turnover which most startups need to invest in their growth. So having, the levels that you need of that to be compliant is a really hard balancing act, because it is that sort of non-functional requirement that has it's almost like home insurance. It has. There's a very little value in terms of if you do it right, you'll never need it. If you don't have it and you have that crash, at least you can then show that you did all the right things and avoid that fine. It's quite a nice way of thinking, almost like that. It is like that home insurance or that car insurance, just to make sure that you need to have thought through your approach towards it. So I know we're getting towards the half an hour mark now. So I know you're a busy man, Aleksa, with a lot of meetings to deal with today. So
I could do this every day, James.
Well, don't say that, because I might well hold you to it. So I know you've got a couple of. I think you've very kindly offered to join us for a couple more episodes in the future. So I'll be looking forward to those. So I think just to sort of finish this in the way that we have been doing for the previous couple of episodes, what would be your main takeaways or main piece of advice to anyone approaching their product roadmap and their sort of technology vision for a startup?
Okay, I'll try to be up to a point and get hopefully our listeners kind of a list of things that you should really hopefully take away from our conversation over the last half an hour. The first one is that the MVP is just the start. You should use product roadmap and technology vision to map the long-term vision for your product and company and all aspects of it. The next thing I would mention is that related to product roadmap, that creating and managing the product roadmap is a journey and not a task that you can do once and forget about. You need to take structured approach, regular reviews, keep it open, communicate the ideas, using it as a communication tool really for your investors, customers, and probably most importantly to inspire the rest of your team. And finally, on the technology, what you want to do as a tech startup and a founder of a tech startup is to ensure that tech product is built on a solid technology foundation that evolves around technology trends that are current, but keeping up with the pace of development going forward. So what we said before, proven technologies that are widely used so you can find enough talent, but find that space for the up-and-coming bleeding-edge tech that can be the mainstream of the future.
Yeah, I'd wholeheartedly echo what you just said there, Aleksa, especially around the product roadmap, which is really within sort of the remit that I usually carry within a project, which is understanding your roadmap, that it is living, and sharing why things change so that everyone understands that you're not just making decisions off the cuff, showing that it change has had this, therefore we're doing this, and really empowering your team to understand what you're doing. Not just a technical team, but the whole team, the whole organisation if possible, and being able to pull together with that shared understanding. And then, like you just said there, Aleksa, with the technology, use something appropriate, but always have an eye open for innovation. Have that room, that scope for it. So I think that just about wraps up today. So thank you very much for your time, Aleksa.
Thank you, James. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, it's good fun. I mean, I think these are very interesting topics. So I think the next one will be even more interesting. I know we've sat through a few of these where we'll be talking about how we actually generate some of the things for this roadmap and for the vision, which is the startup sprint, which was something that we've developed and iterated on ourselves, taking our own medicine to some extent, and based it on the original design sprint, which came out of Google Ventures with Jake Knapp. So I look forward to speaking to you soon, Aleksa. And enjoy your weekend. I hope City don't do too well. I've just seen
James.
I know they've got us in the cup soon.
We must do this again soon.
Yes, we will do. Right, thank you very much, Aleksa. And for everyone else, speak to you soon. I think that just about wraps things up here. If you have any thoughts or questions on anything we've said today, get in touch, whether that be through our Twitter @RealTSF or email at hello@startupfactory.tech, or feel free to drop in for a coffee and a chat. As ever, thanks for listening.